In this video, we're going to be talking about slope. And a lot of times when people talk about slope, they are also asking about a rate of change. And a rate of change basically means like how fast something is changing. A lot of times this might describe speed, things like that. So we're just going to go over some slope problems. We are going to use small numbers. We're not going to do anything with negative numbers. Just to get the basic idea of how to find slope when you're given a line. There are a few ways that people like to talk about slope and how to find it. One very common way is to say rise over run. So that is a really common way that people use to remember. So we'll write that. Another way that people will describe how to find slope is by saying the change in y over the change in x. Okay, that is another way that we describe slope. And some people will try to shorthand this because it is a lot of work to write change in y and change in x. So one thing that you might see sometimes is this triangle. Triangle means change. So if you see this triangle, that means change in y. And same thing here, change in x. So we are going to be mostly using rise and run in this video, but just know all of these three things mean the same thing. Your change in y and your change in x. The last thing that I like to remind myself with are arrows. So when we're talking about change in y, we're talking about the change going up and down. And when we talk about the change in x, we're talking about how something changes side to side. So I think for this video, we're going to be using mostly rise and run, and I will also include arrows for us. Okay, so here's an example of a graph that you might get where they ask you to find the slope of this line. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to find the change between these 2 points. So we have this point right here at 0, 0, which we remember is called the origin. And then we have this point right here at 1, 4. And we need to figure out the change between those 2 points. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to count the distance traveled up and down to get from one point to the other. So this will give me my rise number. And before I do that, I'm going to get set up. I know that my slope is going to have a fraction. My rise number is going to go on top. So I have that all ready for me. I am going to start at my first point, and then I count these spaces. People also like to count them as jumps or hops. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and it took me 4 hops to get to where that second point is. So that is going to be 4. Okay. I'm going to put 4 as my rise number. And now I need to go and figure out what the distance is side to side. So I just need to count 1 space over, and now I am at my second point. So for this problem, my slope is 4 over 1, 4 wholes, and that can be simplified down to 4. So my slope for this one is 4. Here is another line, and we will get our slope set up. We are going to count the rise number. So we're going to start at that first point, and we're going to move up until we get lined up with that second point, and that took me 3 hops. So my rise number is 3. Now I'm going to move across and see how many hops it takes me to get over to my second point. 1, 2, and that took me 2 hops. So this will give me a slope of 3/2. I can't simplify that, so that is pretty good. So you can see in these last 2 examples that we did together, one of our points was the origin at 0, 0. So you may have been able to see that our slope uses the same numbers as that second point, and that will not always be the case. So let's look at an example where one of the points is not 0, 0, or the origin. And here it is. So again, let's get set up. We are going to find our rise number, and then we're going to find our run number. So I'm going to start at that first point, and I'm going to hop up until I'm lined up with that second dot, or that second point, and that only took me 1 hop. So that's my rise number. Now I need to find my run number, which goes across, and I'm going to hop across until I get to my second point. 1, 2, 3, and that took me 3 hops. So that tells me that my slope for this line is 1/3. And I think that's all we're going to do for now for slope. So good luck, and I hope this was helpful.